The lock clicked shut. Sophia Romano twisted the key one last time, checking, always checking, that the cafe door was secure. The street was quiet, the kind of Boston silence that settles after midnight when even the bars have dimmed their lights. She could hear her own footsteps, the jingle of keys in her coat pocket, the distant hum of a car several blocks away. She turned toward the subway station, pulling her jacket tighter against the October wind. That's when she saw him. A man sitting at one of her outdoor tables. Impossible, she'd just locked up. She'd wiped those tables herself 20 minutes ago. Yet there he was, legs crossed, perfectly still, watching her with eyes that seemed to absorb the streetlight rather than reflect it. "We're closed," Sophia said, her voice steadier than her heartbeat. She took 3 steps back toward the door, keys already positioned between her fingers the way her mother had taught her years ago. The man didn't move. He wore a charcoal suit that probably cost more than her monthly rent, and his hands, relaxed on the armrests, bore a single gold ring that caught the light like a warning. "I know," he said. His accent rolled through the words, Italian but softened by years elsewhere. "I'm not here for coffee, Sophia." Her name in his mouth felt like a violation. She hadn't given it. Her name tag was inside, tucked in her apron pocket. "How do you—" "From now on," he interrupted, standing with the fluid grace of someone who'd never questioned his right to command a room, "you're mine." The words hung in the cold air between them. Sophia's mind raced through possibilities. Run, scream, fight, negotiate, but her body remained frozen, calculating. This wasn't random. Random men didn't know your name. Random men didn't sit outside locked cafes speaking in declaratives that sounded like done deals. "I don't know what you think this is," she started, but he raised one hand, and somehow that simple gesture demanded silence more effectively than any shout. "You misunderstand," he said, moving closer. "Not threatening, exactly, but inevitable, like tide coming in. I'm not asking. I'm informing." He stopped 3 feet away, close enough that she could smell expensive cologne and something else, gunpowder, maybe, or just the scent of power that clings to certain men. "My name is Giancarlo Vitali. Perhaps you've heard it whispered in the North End. Perhaps not. Either way, you'll learn it now. Vitali." The name sparked recognition she'd been suppressing. The Italian businessman whose restaurants laundered more than dishes. The man whose charitable donations to local churches came with invisible strings. The shadow behind half the development deals reshaping Boston's waterfront. The mafia boss everyone knew about but nobody acknowledged out loud. The lock clicked shut. "Kindly tell us where you're watching Romano from and what twisted time the it key is. one last time. Warm welcome to the family. Enjoy the story." That the cafe door was secure. Her small, the street was quiet, struggling, the kind of precious Boston cafe, silence set that exactly settles after 3 blocks midnight from when his even the territory. bars have dimmed She their thought lights. she was far enough She away. could hear her own She'd footsteps, thought wrong. The jingle "What of do you keys want?" in her coat she pocket, asked, hating the how distant small hum of her a car voice several sounded. blocks away. "I told you." She turned toward the subway station, Giancarlo tilted pulling her his head jacket slightly, tighter against studying the her October like wind. she was a painting That's he when she just saw purchased. A man "You don't sitting remember at me, one of her do you? outdoor tables. 6 months ago. Impossible.
Your cafe.
She just locked
I
up.
came in for
She'd
espresso.
wiped those
You
tables
corrected
herself
my
20 minutes
pronunciation
ago.
of macchiato.
Yet there he was,
Nobody
legs
corrects
crossed,
me,
perfectly
Sophia.
still,
Nobody
watching
has
her
that
with
kind of
eyes
nerve.
that seemed to absorb
He
the
smiled,
streetlight
but it
rather
didn't
than
reach his
reflect it.
eyes.
"We're closed,"
Or that kind of innocence.
Sophia said, her
I've
voice
been watching
steadier than
since
her
then.
heartbeat.
Waiting.
She took 3
And now
steps
I've
back toward the
decided.
door,
The
keys
subway
already
rumbled
positioned
beneath
between
her
her
feet.
fingers the
Or
way her
maybe that
mother
was
had
just her
taught her
whole
years
world
ago.
shifting on
The
its
man
axis.
didn't move. She wanted to
He
tell
wore
him
a
he was
charcoal
insane,
suit that
that
probably
she wasn't
cost more
property,
than her monthly
that this
rent,
was America,
and his
you
hands,
couldn't just
relaxed
claim
on the
people like
armrests,
real estate. Bore a
but the
single
words
gold
wouldn't
ring
come,
that caught the light
because
like
she
a
could
warning.
see in his expression
"I know,"
that he believed
said,
every word
his
he was
accent
saying.
rolled through the words,
And men like
Italian
Giancarlo
but
Vitali
softened by
didn't make
years
declarations
elsewhere.
they couldn't
"I'm
enforce.
not here for coffee,
I'll see you
Sophia."
tomorrow, he
Her
said,
name in his
turning
mouth
away
felt
as
like
if
a
the
violation.
conversation had concluded.
She hadn't given
Same
it.
time you
Her
opened.
name tag was
4:30,
inside,
I
tucked in
believe.
her apron pocket.
Have my espresso
"How do
ready.
you?" "We have
From now
much to
on,"
discuss
he
about your
interrupted,
future." Standing with
He
the fluid
paused,
grace of
glancing
someone
back
who'd
over his
never
shoulder.
questioned his right
"Our
to command
future.
a room.
You're
Then he
mine.
was gone. The words
Sliding
hung
into a
in the
black
cold
car
air
that
between
appeared
them.
from nowhere,
Sophia's
leaving
mind
Sophia
raced
standing
through
alone on the
possibilities.
empty street with
Run,
her keys
still
scream,
clutched between
fight,
her fingers
negotiate,
like tiny,
but her body
useless
remained
weapons.
frozen.
She stood there for 5
This
full
wasn't
minutes after
random.
his taillights
Random men
disappeared,
didn't know your
trying
name.
to remember how to
Random
breathe.
men didn't sit
Trying to
outside
understand
locked
what had
cafes
just
speaking
happened.
in declaratives
Trying to
that
figure out
sounded
what
like
terrified
done
her
deals.
more. that
I don't know what you think this
Vitali
is.
had just claimed
She
ownership
started,
of her
but
life,
he raised one
or that
hand,
some
and
small,
somehow that simple
calculating
gesture
part of her brain
demanded
was
silence
already
more
wondering how she
effectively
could
than
use
any
this.
shout.
What
You
would you do if a
misunderstand,
dangerous
he
stranger
said,
appeared
moving
after
closer,
closing and
not
declared you
threatening,
belonged to them?
exactly,
Drop your
but
thoughts in the
inevitable,
comments below.
like tide coming
Sophia
in.
didn't sleep that
I'm not
night.
asking.
She sat
I'm
in her
informing.
studio apartment
He
above a
stopped
Korean
3 feet
grocery
away,
store,
close enough
staring
that
at
she
the
could
water
smell
stains on
expensive
her
cologne
ceiling
and something
remembering
else,
the last time
gunpowder,
someone had
maybe,
told her
or
what she
just
was
the scent
worth.
of power that
She
clings
was
to certain
17.
men.
Her
My name
father's
is Johnny
Giancarlo
The
Vitali.
leather chair that
Perhaps
swallowed
you've heard
her
it
whole
whispered
while
in
he
the
stood
north
behind
end.
his mahogany
Perhaps
desk
not.
like a judge
Either way,
passing
you'll learn
sentence.
it now.
You're not college
Vitali.
material,
The name
Sophia.
sparked
He'd
recognition
said
she'd been
not even
suppressing.
looking up from his
The
paperwork.
Italian businessman
Your
whose
stepmother
restaurants
and I have
laundered
discussed
more
it.
than dishes.
The money we
The man
waste on your
whose charitable
tuition would be better
donations to
spent
local
on
churches
churches
came
law
with
school
invisible
applications.
strings.
The shadow behind half the development deals reshaping Boston's waterfront. The mafia boss everyone knew about but nobody acknowledged out loud. The lock clicked shut.
Her half-brother,
Sophia
2 years
Romano
younger,
twisted
who'd
the key
never
one
worked a
last
day
time,
his father didn't
checking,
arrange for him,
always checking,
who called her
that the cafe door was secure
when their parents weren't
the street
listening,
was quiet,
who'd somehow
the kind of
convinced
Boston
everyone that
silence
mediocre
settles
grades
after
from a
midnight
boy
when
showed
even
promise.
the bars have
While
dimmed
her
their
straight
lights.
A's were just a
She
girl
could hear her
trying
own
too hard.
footsteps,
The
the
jingle
jingle
of
of
keys
keys
in her
3
coat
universities,
pocket,
the distant
Sophia
hum
had
of a
whispered,
car several
hating
blocks
how
away.
her voice cracked.
She turned toward
I
the
have
subway
partial
station,
scholarships.
pulling her jacket tighter
Partial.
against the
Her
October
stepmother
wind.
had interrupted
That's
from
when
the
she saw
doorway,
him, arms
a
crossed,
man sitting at one of her
mouth
outdoor
twisted in that
tables.
particular smile
Impossible.
she saved for
She
Sophia
just locked
alone.
up.
She'd
Meaning
wiped
we'd still
those
have to
tables
pay.
herself 20 minutes ago.
So you can get
Yet
some
there he
useless
was,
degree
legs
and come
crossed,
crying back here when
perfectly
you
still,
can't find work.
watching her with eyes
She'd
that
walked
seemed to
closer,
absorb the
her
streetlight
perfume
rather than
overwhelming
reflect in the small space.
We're closed.
Your
Sophia
father's
said,
been more
her
than
voice
generous
steadier
letting
than
you
her
stay
heartbeat.
here rent-free for
She
18
took 3
years.
steps back toward
Consider
the door.
us even.
Keys already
The
positioned
memory
between
still
her
burned.
fingers the way her
But what
mother
came
had taught
after
her
burned
years
hotter.
ago.
The
Sophia
man
had
hadn't
saved
moved.
money from her
He wore
weekend
a
job at a
charcoal
bookstore
suit that probably
2
cost
years
more
of
than
tips
her
and
monthly
wages,
rent,
hidden
and his
in a
hands
shoebox in her
relaxed on the
closet.
armrests,
Enough
bore
for
a
first
single
semester
gold
tuition
ring that
if
caught
she
the
worked
light like a
full-time.
warning.
She'd
I
come
know,
home from her
he said,
graduation
his
ceremony to
accent
find
rolled
the box
through the
empty.
words, Italian
Just empty.
but softened
No
by
note.
years elsewhere.
No apology.
I'm not here for coffee.
When she'd confronted
Sophia,
her father,
her
he
name in
shrugged.
his mouth felt
Family
like a
money
violation.
stays in the family.
She hadn't given
Marcus
it.
needed a car.
Her name tag was inside.
That night,
tucked
Sophia
in her
had
apron
packed
pocket.
one suitcase
How do
and
you
left.
From
She'd
now
slept on her friend
he
Emma's
interrupted,
couch for 3
standing
months,
with the fluid
worked double
grace of
shifts
someone
at a
who'd
diner,
never questioned
applied
his
for
right
every
to command a
grant and
room
loan she
you're
could
mine.
find.
She
The words
clawed her
hung
way
in the
through
community
air between
college.
them, then transferred
Sophia's
to finish
mind
her
raced
business
through
degree at night
possibilities.
while working
Run,
days.
scream,
No help,
fight,
no safety
negotiate.
net. But her
Just
body
rage
remained
converted
frozen,
into fuel.
calculating.
The cafe
This
had
wasn't
been her
random.
triumph.
Random
Small,
men didn't know
struggling,
your name.
absolutely.
Random men
But
didn't
hers,
sit outside
every
locked
cracked
cafes
tile,
speaking in
every
declaratives
mismatched
that
chair,
sounded like
every
done
espresso
deals.
machine repair
I don't
she'd
know what you
YouTubed
think
her
this
way
is.
through. She
Proof
started,
that they'd been
but
wrong
he
about
raised
her.
one hand,
Proof
and
that she
somehow
didn't
that
need them.
simple gesture
That she
demanded
could build
silence
something
more
more
effectively
effectively
than any
survive.
shout.
And
You
now Giancarlo
misunderstand,
Vitali
he
wanted
said,
to take
moving
that too.
closer,
Wanted
not
to add her to
threatening,
his collection
exactly,
of things he owned,
but inevitable,
just like her
like
father had
tide
owned her
coming in.
choices. I'm not
Just
asking.
like her stepmother
I'm
had owned
informing.
her dignity.
He stopped
Just
3
like
feet
Marcus
away,
had owned
close enough that she
opportunities
could
that should
smell
have been
expensive
hers.
cologne and something
Sophia
else
stood and
gunpowder,
walked to her window.
maybe, or
Dawn
just the
was
scent of
breaking
power
over
that
Boston,
clings to certain
painting
men.
the sky
My
purple
name is
and gold.
Giancarlo Vitali.
4 hours until
Perhaps
she had
you've
to
heard
open.
it whispered in the
4
north end.
hours until
Perhaps
Giancarlo
not.
would walk
Either
through her
way,
door
you'll learn it
expecting
now.
obedience.
Vitali.
Her reflection
The name
stared
sparked
back at her from the
recognition
glass.
she'd been suppressing.
28 years
The
old,
Italian
dark
businessman
circles
whose
under
restaurants
dark eyes,
laundered
hair
more
she
than
hadn't
dishes.
bothered to brush.
The man whose
She looked
charitable
tired.
donations to
She
local
looked
churches
defeated.
came with
She
invisible
smiled.
strings.
Let him think
The
that.
shadow behind
Let them all
half
think
the
that
development
her
deals
family had taught her something
Boston's waterfront.
valuable,
Even if
the
they
mafia
hadn't meant
boss
to.
everyone knew
They
about,
taught
but
her that the
nobody
people who
acknowledged out
underestimate
loud.
you give you the sharpest weapon. They taught her that silence can hide calculation. That patience looks like weakness until the moment it doesn't. Giancarlo Vitali
Vitali thought he was claiming a frightened cafe owner. He had no idea what he'd actually found. Sophia pulled out her laptop and started searching. Every article about him. Every photo. Every business connection. If she was going to be his, as he'd put it, then she needed to understand exactly what his meant. Have you ever had someone underestimate you only to prove them wrong? Share your story below. Giancarlo arrived at exactly 4:30. Sophia heard the car before she saw it, that particular purr of an engine that cost more than most people earned in a year. She was wiping down the counter, pretending her hands weren't shaking, pretending she hadn't been watching the door for the past 20 minutes. He entered like he owned the place. Maybe in his mind, he already did. The 3 customers scattered around her cafe looked up, then quickly looked away. People recognized danger even when it wore a tailored suit and Italian leather shoes. He took the same table he'd sat at outside, corner position, back to the wall, clear view of both the entrance and the kitchen. Military training, Sophia noted. Or prison. Or just decades of needing to see threats coming. "Your espresso," she said, setting the cup down with steady hands. She'd made it perfectly. If he was going to invade her life, she wouldn't give him ammunition to criticize her craft. "Sit," he commanded. Not asked. Commanded. Sophia remained standing. "I have customers. They can wait." His eyes locked on hers, testing. This was a game to him. Push the boundary, see where she'd break. She'd seen this before. Her stepmother had played the same game at family dinners, making small demands that grew larger. "Stand here. Don't speak. Leave the room." Each compliance leading to greater ones until you forgot you'd ever had the right to refuse. Sophia pulled out the chair and sat. But she didn't relax into it. She perched on the edge, spine straight, ready to move. The message was clear. She'd sit because she chose to, not because he'd ordered it. Giancarlo's mouth twitched. Amusement? Irritation? Hard to tell. "You researched me last night," he said. Not a question. Yes. No point lying when he clearly had ways of knowing. "I assume that's not a problem, since you've apparently been researching me for 6 months. Touché." He sipped his espresso, and something like approval flickered across his face. "Tell me what you learned." Sophia had prepared for this. She'd spent hours reading, cross-referencing, building a mental map. "You own 7 restaurants, 2 construction companies, and a shipping business. You donate to St. Leonard's Church and the North End Community Center. Your imports come primarily through your cousin's operation in Palermo. You've been investigated 4 times but never charged. You're either very clean or very connected." "Both," he said simply. "What else?" This was the test. What she said next would tell him whether she was just smart or actually useful. Sophia leaned forward slightly. "You're consolidating. 3 of your restaurants opened in the last 18 months, all in neighborhoods where your competitors just closed. Not coincidence. You're expanding territory but making it look legitimate. And you're doing it quietly, which means you're either avoiding someone's attention or preparing for something bigger." Giancarlo set down his cup slowly. The cafe had gone silent. Her other customers had left, she realized. When had that happened? "Very good," he said softly. "Now tell me why you're not terrified." "I am terrified," Sophia admitted. Honesty, she'd learned, could be its own kind of armor. "But fear doesn't help me. Understanding helps me. You chose me for a reason beyond good espresso. You could have anyone, prettier, younger, more connected. But you chose the struggling cafe owner with no family, no protection, no resources. That means you either see something useful or you're making a mistake." "I don't make mistakes." His voice dropped lower, dangerous. "And yes, I see something useful. You survived your family's betrayal and built this place alone. That takes intelligence and will. Rare combination." So he knew about her family too. Of course he did. Sophia felt exposed, like he'd read her diary without permission. "What exactly do you want from me?" "Loyalty," Giancarlo said. "Discretion. Presence when required. In return, you'll have protection and opportunity. Your cafe will thrive. Your debts, and yes, I know about those too, will disappear. You'll want for nothing. Except freedom." "Freedom," he repeated, tasting the word like bad wine. "What's freedom given you so far?" "This." He gestured at her modest cafe. "Working 16-hour days to barely break even? 1 bad month from losing everything." He leaned closer. "I'm offering you something better than freedom, Sophia. I'm offering you power." The word hung between them like forbidden fruit. Power. The thing she'd craved every time her father had dismissed her. Every time her stepmother had smirked. Every time Marcus had taken what should have been hers. Giancarlo was watching her face, reading every micro-expression. He knew he'd hit something true. "I need time to think," Sophia said. "You have until tomorrow. Same time." He stood, dropped $200 bills on the table for a $4 espresso. And Sophia? Don't consider running. I've invested time in you. I protect my investments. He left. The door chimed cheerfully behind him, completely at odds with the threat he'd just delivered. Sophia picked up the money with trembling fingers and finally let herself feel the full weight of terror she'd been suppressing. But underneath the fear, something else stirred. Curiosity. Giancarlo Vitali was powerful, yes. Dangerous, absolutely. But he was also human. And humans made mistakes, no matter what they claimed. She just had to watch carefully enough to find his. Would you take a devil's bargain if it meant escaping your past? Let us know in the comments. Sophia spent the next week in what she privately called observation mode. She'd said yes to Giancarlo. What choice did she have? But yes didn't mean surrender. It meant access. And access meant information. Giancarlo came to the cafe every morning at 4:30. Always alone, always for exactly 20 minutes. He drank his espresso, read his newspaper, an actual physical newspaper, which Sophia found oddly charming, and occasionally made phone calls in rapid Italian that she pretended not to understand. She'd taken 2 years of Italian in college, back when she'd thought she might study abroad. Another dream her family had crushed. But now those classes were paying dividends she'd never imagined. She learned that Giancarlo had a lieutenant named Paolo who handled enforcement. She learned that shipments arrived every other Thursday. She learned that he had trouble with someone named Dante in Providence, and that this Dante was pushing into Boston territory. Most importantly, she learned that Giancarlo trusted patterns. He liked routine, predictability, control. That was his weakness, Sophia realized. He surrounded himself with order because chaos frightened him more than he'd ever admit. On Thursday evening, Giancarlo asked her to close early. "You're coming with me," he said. Not an invitation. She locked up and followed him to his car, heart hammering. This was new. This broke his pattern. Where were they going? His driver, a thick-necked man who looked like he'd been carved from concrete, held the door open. Sophia slid into leather seats that probably cost more than her entire car. They drove north, out of Boston proper, into suburbs where houses had circular driveways and gates. The car stopped at a restaurant called Vitali's, original, Sophia thought, and Giancarlo led her inside like she was wearing an evening gown instead of her café jeans and cardigan. The host's eyes widened. He snapped his fingers and suddenly waiters appeared, a private room materialized. Wine arrived without being ordered. "You're watching everything," Giancarlo observed, studying her across the candlelit table. "Cataloging. Filing away. You think I don't notice?" Sophia's blood froze. Had she been that obvious? "I'm just. Don't apologize. I like it." He poured wine into her glass. "Most people in your position would be paralyzed. You're learning. Adapting. It's why I chose correctly." He raised his glass. "To new partnerships." She drank because refusing seemed dangerous. The wine was perfect, of course. Everything in Giancarlo's world was perfect. Controlled. "Why am I really here?" she asked. "Not the restaurant. Why me?" "You still haven't actually explained." Giancarlo set down his glass. For the first time, something unguarded crossed his face. "My wife died 3 years ago," he said quietly. "Cancer. She was the only person who ever told me no. The only one who saw the man instead of the monster." He looked at Sophia with something that might have been loneliness in a different man. "When you corrected my pronunciation, you reminded me of her. That courage. That refusal to be intimidated." Sophia felt unwanted sympathy stir in her chest. She crushed it immediately. Sympathy was dangerous. Sympathy made you forget that this man had threatened you, owned you, controlled you. "I'm not your wife," she said carefully. "No," Giancarlo agreed. "You're something else entirely. She was my conscience. You, I think, will be my mirror. You'll show me what I'm becoming." He smiled, and this time it was almost genuine. "Whether I like what I see or not." Dinner arrived. Courses Sophia couldn't name, each more elaborate than the last. Between bites, Giancarlo talked. About his childhood in Palermo. About coming to America at 19 with nothing. About building his empire one restaurant, one connection, one calculated risk at a time. He was charming when he wanted to be, Sophia realized. Dangerous in a completely different way than she'd expected. That's when she saw him. Paolo, the lieutenant she'd heard about but never met, entering through a side door. His face was tight with urgency. He whispered something in Giancarlo's ear that made his entire posture change. The charming dinner companion vanished. The mafia boss returned. "Excuse me," Giancarlo said, standing. "Business." He left Sophia alone in the private room. She should have stayed put. Should have been the obedient cafe owner, grateful for expensive wine and good food. Instead, she stood and moved to the door, cracking it just enough to hear voices from the hallway. "Shipment intercepted," Paolo was saying. "Dante's people. They knew the route, the time, everything. We have a leak." "Who?" Giancarlo's voice was ice. "Still investigating. But boss, there's something else. The cargo wasn't just wine." Someone added. Paolo's voice dropped too low to hear. Sophia's heart pounded. She eased the door shut and returned to her seat just as Giancarlo came back. His face showed nothing, but his hands told a different story. They were clenched into fists he was fighting to relax. "Everything okay?" Sophia asked innocently. Giancarlo studied her for a long moment. "You're a terrible liar," he finally said. "Your left eye twitches when you're nervous. You heard something." There was no point denying it. "I heard you have a problem," Sophia said carefully. "And that someone betrayed you." "Yes." He sat down, refilled his wine glass, drained it. "The question is whether that someone is in this room." The threat was clear. Sophia met his eyes anyway. "If I was working against you, would I admit I'd been listening? I'd pretend I hadn't heard anything and wait to see what information I could sell. Unless you're smart enough to know that admission builds trust." "Or," Sophia countered, "maybe I'm just a cafe owner who's in over her head and too curious for her own good." Giancarlo laughed, an actual laugh, sharp and unexpected. "Perhaps," he said. "We'll see." "But Sophia? Curiosity in my world has consequences. Remember that." She did remember it. All the way home. All through the night as she lay awake, replaying every word, every gesture. Giancarlo had a traitor in his organization. Someone feeding information to his enemies. And he was starting to suspect everyone. Which meant she needed to be more careful. Or smarter. Or both. Because the whisper she'd heard, the one Paolo had said too quietly, had actually been perfectly audible to Sophia's trained ear. And what he'd said was going to change everything. What secret do you think Sophia heard? Drop your theories below before the next chapter. Sophia discovered patience could be a weapon 3 weeks into her arrangement with Giancarlo. He'd taken to bringing her to meetings, not inside them, but nearby. A restaurant table while he talked in the back room. His car while he handled business on the corner. Always watching. Always testing whether she'd run, talk, or simply exist in his world without breaking. She chose option 4, absorb everything. She learned that Giancarlo's empire ran on loyalty bought through fear and reward. She learned that the traitor Paolo had mentioned was still unknown, still feeding information to Dante. She learned that Giancarlo was planning something big, a shipment arriving in 6 weeks that would change the game, according to whispered conversations she wasn't supposed to hear. But most importantly, she learned that Giancarlo's control had cracks. His nephew Marco handled the South Boston operations and skimmed money. His accountant Sal was gambling again despite promises to quit. His right-hand man Paolo was sleeping with the wife of a rival boss. Small betrayals, everyday corruption. The kind of thing that festered. It reminded Sophia of her family. Her father had ruled through intimidation, but behind his back, her stepmother had drained accounts. Marcus had stolen from both parents while playing the golden child. Everyone took what they could while maintaining appearances. Eventually, the whole structure had collapsed, her father bankrupt, her stepmother gone, Marcus facing fraud charges that daddy's money could barely cover. The same patterns were here, just with higher stakes and sharper consequences. And Sophia was beginning to understand how to navigate them. "You're different," Giancarlo observed one morning at the cafe. November had arrived, bringing cold that seeped through the walls. Sophia had started opening at 4 just to warm the place before he showed up. You were frightened when we met. Now you're calculating. Should I apologize for adapting? Sophia poured his espresso with steady hands. No. I find it intriguing. He stirred in sugar, always 1 spoon, never 2. You remind me of myself at your age. Watching. Learning. Waiting for the right moment. Moment for what? To strike. He smiled. I was a waiter in Palermo. Invisible. Everyone talked around me like I was furniture. I learned more in 1 year serving tables than most people learn in a lifetime. By the time I made my move, I knew exactly which families were weak, which alliances were fake, which bosses were dying or desperate. He sipped his espresso. Patience isn't weakness, Sophia. It's strategy. The words landed like permission, like he was teaching her the game even as he kept her trapped in it. Sophia felt something shift inside her, a realization that maybe she and Giancarlo weren't as different as she'd thought. Both had been underestimated. Both had been betrayed by people who should have protected them. Both had built survival strategies from pain. That afternoon, an envelope arrived at the café. No return address. Inside, a single invitation printed on heavy cream cardstock. The annual Vitali Foundation Gala. Black tie. Saturday, 3 weeks away. Below the printed text, a handwritten note in Giancarlo's precise script. You'll attend. Dress will be provided. Sophia held the invitation, feeling its weight. A gala meant donors, politicians, other crime families dressed in tuxedos pretending they were legitimate. It meant opportunity. It meant danger. It meant she'd have to be perfect for an entire evening under the scrutiny of people who could smell fear like blood in water. She called the only person she trusted. Emma, her friend from the couchsurfing days, now a paralegal dating a public defender. I need a favor, Sophia said. Always straight to business, Emma laughed. What's up? Remember when you said your boyfriend works with the organized crime task force? Silence. Then, Sophia, what have you gotten into? Everything, Sophia thought. But what she said was, I just need to know what's legal to know. Public record stuff. About Giancarlo Vitali. The Giancarlo Vitali? Sophia, tell me you're not. I'm not anything, Sophia interrupted. I just need information. Please. Emma was quiet for a long moment. I'll see what I can find. But Sophia? These people are dangerous. Whatever you're doing, be careful. I'm always careful, Sophia lied. The dress arrived 5 days before the gala. Not delivered by mail, hand-delivered by a woman named Rosa who owned a boutique in the North End. She brought 3 options, each more stunning than the last. Midnight blue silk, emerald green satin, black lace with strategic coverage. Sophia chose the black. It felt like armor disguised as elegance. Mr. Vitali has excellent taste, Rosa said, pinning the hem. He chose these himself. Usually he sends Paolo. Usually. Sophia kept her voice neutral. For other women. Business associates. Rosa's eyes met Sophia's in the mirror. But he's never delivered invitations personally before. Never written notes. You're different to him. I hope you know what that means. Sophia did know. It meant she'd gone from possession to investment. From object to asset. And assets were valuable only as long as they performed. The night before the gala, Emma called. I found something, she said, voice tight. The task force has been building a case for 2 years. They're close to moving. There's going to be a raid, Sophia. So, maybe within the month. Sophia's hands went cold. On Giancarlo? On everyone. His suppliers, his operations, his connections. They're trying to take down the whole network. Emma paused. The only way someone walks away from that is if they cooperate first. You understand what I'm telling you? She understood. The FBI was coming. Giancarlo's empire was about to collapse. And Sophia had to decide, immediately, which side of the destruction she wanted to be on. But there was something Emma didn't know. Something Sophia had pieced together from whispered conversations and careful observation. The traitor feeding information to Dante? It wasn't just about territory or money. Someone inside Giancarlo's organization was working with the FBI, setting him up, creating evidence, building the case from the inside. And Sophia thought she knew who. Who do you think the traitor is? Comment your guess below and let's see if you're right in the next chapter. Sophia started small. That was the trick her family had never learned. They'd always been too greedy, too obvious. Her stepmother stealing thousands at once. Marcus forging checks with his father's signature. Amateur moves that invited discovery. Sophia was smarter. She made herself indispensable first. She began arriving at Giancarlo's restaurant early, bringing pastries she'd baked at 3 in the morning. She learned his schedule better than his own assistant. When his accountant Sal made an error in the quarterly reports, drunk again, probably, Sophia caught it before anyone else noticed. Saved Giancarlo from a tax audit that could have opened doors to federal scrutiny. You're wasted in that cafe, Giancarlo told her over dinner 2 weeks after the gala. They'd fallen into a routine. He'd pick her up, they'd eat, he'd talk business while she listened. You should work for me. Officially. Doing what? Sophia kept her voice neutral, but her heart hammered. This was the opening she'd been waiting for. Management. Operations. You see details other people miss. He poured wine, the expensive kind that tasted like money. Paolo's been sloppy lately. Distracted. I need someone I can trust. Trust. The word was a gift and a weapon. Sophia thought about the FBI agent in green, about Paolo's whispered conspiracy, about the shipment arriving in 10 days that would either make or break Giancarlo's empire. She thought about Emma's warning, about the raid coming soon, about choices that couldn't be unmade. I'd need to know everything, Sophia said carefully. Can't manage what I don't understand. Giancarlo studied her face for a long moment. There are things you don't want to know, Sophia. Things that make you complicit. Once you cross that line, there's no going back. I crossed that line the night you sat outside my cafe, Sophia said. Everything since then has just been walking deeper into the dark. Might as well see where it leads. Something flickered in Giancarlo's expression, approval mixed with regret. You remind me so much of her, he said quietly. My wife. She used to say the same thing. That she'd rather know the truth and hate me than live in comfortable ignorance. Did she? Hate you, I mean? Some days. He smiled, but it was sad, worn at the edges. Some days she looked at me like I was the devil himself. Other days, like I was the only thing worth saving. I never knew which version I'd get. He reached across the table, took Sophia's hand. His skin was warm, calloused. Human. I'm giving you one last chance to stay in the light, Sophia. Say no. Walk away. I'll protect your cafe, make sure you're safe. But this offer expires tonight. It was a test. Everything with Giancarlo was a test. Sophia squeezed his hand once, then withdrew hers. When do I start? Tomorrow. I'll have Paolo show you the operations. Giancarlo's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, frowned. Excuse me. I need to take this. He stepped away, voice dropping into rapid Italian. Sophia sat alone at the table, watching him through the window as he paced outside. His body language was tense, aggressive. Something was wrong. Through the glass, she caught fragments, can't be right, and, check the source, and finally, find the leak before I do, or you're both done. He came back inside, expression carefully blank. We need to leave. Now. What happened? Someone tipped off the feds about tomorrow's delivery. Smaller shipment, nothing critical, but it means they're watching. Close. His jaw clenched. It means the traitor's still active. Sophia's mind raced. The FBI agent had mentioned cooperation, had given Sophia an opening. Had she somehow warned them? No, Sophia hadn't said anything, hadn't made contact. But Paolo had. Paolo was still feeding them information, still building the case. And now Giancarlo was getting desperate, which made him dangerous. They drove in silence. Giancarlo's driver took turns too fast, ran lights that should have stopped them. When they pulled up outside Sophia's apartment, Giancarlo grabbed her wrist, not hard, but firm. Claiming, I need to know you're with me, he said. Completely. No doubts. No hesitation. Because what happens next requires absolute loyalty. What happens next? I'm cleaning house. Everyone gets tested. Everyone proves themselves or disappears. His eyes were cold now, the warmth from dinner completely gone. Including you, Sophia. Including you. He released her wrist. Sophia climbed out of the car on shaking legs and watched him drive away. Then she ran upstairs, grabbed her phone, and called Emma. The raid, Sophia said without preamble. When exactly? Sophia, I can't. Emma, please. I need to know when. Lives depend on it. Silence. Then, 12 days. They're coordinating with multiple agencies. It's going to be massive. Emma's voice dropped. Sophia, if you're there when it happens, you're going down with everyone else. They won't care that you were forced into this. They'll see you as part of it. 12 days. The big shipment was in 10. Giancarlo would move his operation, secure everything, make himself untouchable. Or he'd discover Paolo's betrayal and people would die. Or the FBI would move early and catch everyone including Sophia in the net. She had 12 days to figure out how to survive this. 12 days to choose between loyalty and betrayal, between justice and survival, between the person she'd been and the person Giancarlo was turning her into. But here's what Sophia realized as she sat in her dark apartment, city lights spreading below her window like fallen stars. She didn't have to choose. She could create a third option. She could do what her family had never managed. She could play the game so perfectly that everyone thought they'd won, while she walked away with everything that mattered. Her freedom. Her dignity. Her life. She just needed to be smarter than everyone else in the room. And Sophia Romano had been training for that her entire life. What would you sacrifice to survive? Your morals or your freedom? Tell us below. The parallel hit Sophia at 4 in the morning, staring at her cafe's ceiling. Giancarlo's organization wasn't that different from her family. Different scale, higher stakes, but the same fundamental structure. A patriarch at the top, lieutenants jockeying for position, everyone lying to everyone else while pretending at unity. Her father had ruled through intimidation and control. So did Giancarlo. Her stepmother had undermined from within, stealing slowly. Paolo was doing the same, just with federal backing instead of personal greed. Marcus had played the golden child while betraying everyone. Giancarlo's nephew Marco was running the same game in South Boston. The pattern was clear now. And patterns, once understood, could be manipulated. Sophia started with Marco. Giancarlo had mentioned him once, dismissively, "My sister's boy thinks he's clever." She'd filed that away, and now she pulled it out. Marco ran 3 restaurants in Southie, managed shipments through the port, reported directly to Giancarlo. On paper, loyal. In practice? She found him at his flagship restaurant Tuesday afternoon. Walked in like she belonged there, another trick she'd learned. Confidence was camouflage. "Marco Vitali?" she said to the host. "Tell him Sophia Romano needs 5 minutes. He'll know the name." She did. Marco appeared fast, younger than she expected, maybe 30. Handsome in that overgroomed way that screamed insecurity. "You're Giancarlo's girl," he said, looking her over. "What do you want?" "To offer you something your uncle can't." Sophia kept her voice low. 10 minutes. Private. Your office." Marco's eyes narrowed, but curiosity won. He led her upstairs to an office that tried too hard. Leather, chrome, a view of the harbor. "Talk," he said. "Your uncle's going down. FBI's building a case. He has maybe 2 weeks before everything collapses." Sophia watched Marco's face carefully. "You can go down with him, or you can position yourself to take over when he's gone." "That's treason," Marco said, but his voice lacked conviction. "That's survival. Giancarlo's from the old world. He doesn't understand that empires fall now with paperwork instead of bullets. The feds have his operations mapped. They have informants. Inside his organization." Sophia leaned forward. "But they don't have you. Not yet. You're insulated enough to claim ignorance. Smart enough to consolidate power once he's arrested." Marco was listening now, really listening. "What do you want?" "Protection. When this blows up, I need someone who'll vouch that I was coerced, forced into Giancarlo's world. Someone with credibility. Sophia pulled out her phone, showed him photos she'd taken, carefully timed shots of Giancarlo's operations, documents she'd photographed at his restaurant. I can give you leverage. Information the feds would pay for. Or information you could use to secure your own position once Giancarlo's gone. You're playing both sides, Marco said, half admiration, half disgust. I'm playing my side. The only side that matters. Sophia stood. You have 48 hours to decide. After that, I find someone else. She left before he could respond. Heart pounding, hands shaking, but face calm. That was the first piece. Now for the second. Paolo was harder to find. He'd been scarce since the gala, probably checking in with his FBI handler, coordinating the raid. Sophia tracked him to a gym in Roxbury, neutral territory, away from Giancarlo's usual haunts. She waited until he finished his workout, then cornered him in the parking lot. We need to talk, she said. Paolo's hand moved toward his waistband. Gun, probably. About what? About the fact that you're working with the FBI, and Giancarlo's getting close to figuring it out. Sophia raised her hands, non-threatening. I'm not here to expose you. I'm here to help you. Why would you help me? Paolo's voice was pure suspicion. Because if Giancarlo discovers you before the FBI moves, you're dead. And if you're dead, you can't testify. And if you can't testify, the case falls apart. Sophia stepped closer. I'm guessing your handler promised you witness protection. New identity. Fresh start. But that only works if you survive long enough to testify. Paolo's expression flickered. Surprise, then calculation. What do you want? Same thing you do. Alive. Sophia pulled out a burner phone, handed it to him. Call your handler. Tell them Giancarlo's cleaning house in 72 hours. He's testing everyone's loyalty. If the FBI doesn't move the raid up, Paolo Ricci disappears before he can testify. Why are you doing this? Because empires built on fear always collapse from within. Your way or mine, Giancarlo's done. I'm just choosing the version where innocent people survive. Sophia turned to leave, then paused. One more thing. When you testify, you tell them I helped you. That I provided information. That I was cooperating from the inside. That's not true, Paolo said. Make it true. Or I tell Giancarlo everything right now. Sophia smiled, the same smile she'd used on her stepmother during family dinners. We all make choices, Paolo. Choose smart. She walked away, got in her car, drove 3 blocks before pulling over to vomit in a trash can. Her hands wouldn't stop shaking. She'd just threatened a man who'd killed people. She'd just manipulated a federal investigation. She'd just committed at least 4 crimes she could think of. But she'd also just created her exit strategy. Marco would vouch for her innocence. Paolo would testify she'd helped. The FBI would see her as a reluctant informant instead of a criminal. And when everything collapsed, when Giancarlo's empire fell and the arrests came and the trial started, Sophia Romano would walk away clean. That night, Giancarlo took her to his private estate. Sophia had never been there before. Hidden behind walls in Newton, the house was everything his public persona suggested: old money elegance, art that belonged in museums, security that could repel small armies. I'm moving the big shipment up, Giancarlo said. They sat in his study, fire crackling, brandy in crystal glasses. Tomorrow night instead of next week. Can't risk another leak. Sophia's blood turned cold. Tomorrow. The FBI expected 10 days. Paolo's handler expected a week to coordinate. Moving up the timeline would catch everyone off guard, which was exactly Giancarlo's intention. Smart, Sophia managed. And I need you there. At the warehouse. Witnessing. Giancarlo's eyes locked on hers. Final test, Sophia. Prove you're truly with me, or prove you're the leak. The trap was perfect. Show up and become complicit in whatever illegal shipment arrived, or refuse and confirm his suspicions. Either way, Sophia was caught. Unless she was smarter than the trap. What time? She asked. How would you escape a trap where every choice leads to destruction? Comment your strategy. Sophia made 3 phone calls that night. First, to the burner phone she'd given Paolo. It's tomorrow, 10 p.m. Warehouse on Summer Street. Move the rate up or it's over. She hung up before he could respond. Second, to Marco. John Carlo's making his move tomorrow night. After that, you either take position or lose your chance forever. Third, to Emma. If I don't call you by midnight tomorrow, go to the FBI. Tell them everything. There's a folder taped under my bathroom sink with all the evidence. Her voice cracked. And Em? I'm sorry for dragging you into this. Sophia, what are you? Sophia hung up. No time for explanations. No time for doubt. She had 18 hours to orchestrate the collapse of a criminal empire while somehow walking away clean. 18 hours to turn every betrayal, every manipulation, every careful observation into a strategy that would set her free. The warehouse squatted on Summer Street like a concrete tumor. Sophia arrived at 9:30, early enough to see the setup. John Carlo's people everywhere, guards on the perimeter, trucks positioned for loading, money counters ready. Whatever was coming was big enough to justify this level of security. John Carlo found her near the office. You came, he said, something like relief in his voice. I said I would. Sophia forced her hands steady. What happens now? Now we wait. The shipment arrives at 10:15. You watch. You witness. You become part of this. He touched her face gently, almost tender. After tonight, there's no going back, Sophia. You'll be mine completely. Protected, provided for, but mine. Just like her father had owned her choices. Just like her stepmother had owned her dignity. Just like everyone who'd ever had power over her had demanded ownership in exchange for survival. Sophia looked at John Carlo and saw her entire past reflected back. The same patterns, the same control, the same lie that safety required surrender. I understand, she said. And she did. She understood that she'd rather die free than live owned. At 10 p.m. exactly, everything happened at once. The shipment truck arrived, backing into the loading bay. Paolo emerged from the office, phone in hand, eyes meeting Sophia's for one brief moment. Outside, engines, multiple engines, wrong timing. John Carlo's head snapped up. That's not. FBI. Nobody move. The doors exploded inward. Agents flooded the warehouse like water through a broken dam. Lights, weapons, shouting. John Carlo's people scattered, some running, some surrendering, some pulling guns they'd never get to fire. The truck driver dove from his cab. Containers burst open, revealing not weapons or drugs but something else entirely. Documents. Financial records. Evidence that John Carlo had been moving for months, consolidating into one shipment to hide before the feds could find it. Paolo had known. Of course he'd known. He'd been feeding them information for 2 years. This whole operation had been designed to catch John Carlo with all his secrets in one place. John Carlo grabbed Sophia's arm, pulled her toward a side exit. Come on. No. Sophia wrenched free. It's over, John Carlo. You're done. His face transformed. Shock, rage, betrayal. You, he breathed. You're the leak. All this time. I'm not the leak. Paolo is. But I knew. I watched. I learned. Sophia stepped back as agents closed in. You taught me patience, remember? Strategy. How to survive in a world that wants to own you. I learned too well. I trusted you, John Carlo said, and for the first time he sounded broken. No. You own me. There's a difference. Sophia raised her hands as agents reached them. My name is Sophia Romano. I'm cooperating. I have evidence. I want to make a deal. The FBI agent in green appeared from the crowd, no longer pretending to be someone's aunt. Take her separately, she ordered. And someone read Mr. Vitali his rights. He's going to need them. They separated Sophia from the chaos. Took her to a different building, different room, different reality. The agent, Special Agent Taurus, she introduced herself, laid out the terms. Full cooperation. Complete testimony. Every detail about John Carlo's organization, his operations, his connections. Marco Vitali will confirm I was forced into this, Sophia said. Paolo Ricci will testify I provided information that helped your investigation. I have documentation of Giancarlo's threats, his control, his coercion. Torres smiled. We know. We've been watching you since the gala, Sophia. We knew you were playing your own game. We just needed to see which side you'd choose. I chose my side. The only side that matters. Sophia met Torres's eyes. My freedom. My life. My terms. Smart girl, Torres said. Smarter than most people caught in these situations. You'll testify, you'll cooperate, and then you'll disappear. New city, new name, fresh start. That's the deal. Sophia thought about her cafe, her apartment, the life she'd built brick by careful brick. Thought about starting over somewhere else with nothing but what she could carry. Thought about freedom and what it cost and whether any price was too high. One condition, Sophia said. When this is over, when I'm relocated, I want help opening another cafe. Small business loan, clean credit, legitimate start. That's my price for cooperation. Torres considered. Done. But Sophia? This protection only lasts as long as your testimony is valuable. Once the trials are over, you're on your own. I've always been on my own, Sophia said. I'm used to it. They kept her in protective custody for 3 weeks. Sophia watched from a distance as Giancarlo's empire collapsed. Arrests spread through Boston's underworld like fire through dry wood. Marco Vitali, true to her calculation, claimed ignorance and cooperated, positioning himself to rebuild on the ashes. Paolo testified, painting Sophia as an informant rather than accomplice. The narrative held. Sophia Romano, coerced cafe owner who'd helped bring down a mafia boss from the inside. Brave, clever, innocent enough to walk away. The truth was messier as truth always is. Sophia hadn't been innocent. She'd been calculating. She'd manipulated everyone, Giancarlo, Paolo, Marco, even the FBI, into positions that served her survival. She'd used other people's betrayals as tools for her own escape. She wasn't a hero. She was a survivor who'd learned the rules and played them better than anyone expected. Would you manipulate everyone around you to survive, or is there a line you won't cross? 6 months later, Sophia stood in a different cafe in a different city. Portland, Oregon, about as far from Boston as you could get without leaving the country. The cafe was smaller than her original, rougher around the edges, but it was hers. The loan had come through. The new identity, Sarah Mitchell, felt strange but functional. She was building something again, brick by brick, espresso by espresso. The morning rush was ending when the bell chimed. Sophia looked up from the register and froze. Marcus. Her half-brother, standing in her cafe 3,000 miles from where he should be, wearing an expensive suit and that familiar smirk. Hello, Sophia, he said, using her real name like a weapon. Or should I call you Sarah now? Nice place you've got here. Very quaint. Sophia's mind raced. How had he found her? Witness protection was supposed to be ironclad. What do you want? What I've always wanted. What's mine? Marcus approached the counter, casual as a predator. See, Dad died 3 months ago. Heart attack. Sudden. And in his will, surprise, he left everything to me. The house, the accounts, the investments. Everything except one thing. He pulled out a folder, dropped it on the counter. Inside, documents Sophia recognized immediately. Her grandmother's jewelry, the pieces her mother had left her. Worth a fortune, held in a trust Sophia had forgotten about in the chaos of witness protection. That jewelry legally became yours at 30, Marcus continued. Which was 2 months ago. I need you to sign it over to me. Family assets should stay in the family, don't you think? Sophia looked at her brother, really looked at him. Saw the same greed that had driven her stepmother. The same entitlement her father had worn like cologne. The same pattern of taking and taking until nothing remained. And she realized something profound. She could give it to him. Could sign away her inheritance just like she'd signed away her old life. Could let him think he'd won. Or she could finally, completely, break the pattern. No, Sophia said simply. Marcus's smirk faltered. Excuse me? I said no. That jewelry was my mother's. It's mine. And you can't have it. Sophia leaned forward, her voice dropping to something cold and final. You spent our whole childhood taking from me. My savings, my opportunities, my dignity. You took and never thought I'd stop you. But I'm done being the person who surrenders because it's easier than fighting. Sophia. Sarah, she corrected. That's my name now. Sarah Mitchell. Sophia Romano died in witness protection. And she took your power to hurt her along with her. Sophia pulled out her phone, called the number Torres had given her for emergencies. I need to report someone who's discovered my protected location. Yes, I'll hold. Marcus's face went pale. You're bluffing. Try me. Sophia smiled, and this time it wasn't strategic or calculated. It was genuine. I brought down a mafia boss, Marcus. You think I'm scared of an entitled trust fund kid who's never earned anything in his life? Marcus stared at her, seeing her, really seeing her, for the first time. The sister he'd tormented wasn't there anymore. Someone harder, smarter, more dangerous had taken her place. He grabbed his folder and left without another word. Sophia finished the call with Torres, who promised to handle it. Then she went back to work, pulling espresso shots for customers who didn't know her history, didn't care about her past, just wanted good coffee and a quiet moment before their day exploded into chaos. That evening, Sophia locked up her cafe and walked home through Portland rain. Her apartment was small but comfortable. No family photos, no connections to before. Just her cat, a stray she'd adopted last month, and the future she was building one careful choice at a time. Her phone buzzed. A known number. Sophia almost didn't answer, but curiosity won. Hello. Sophia Romano. Giancarlo's voice, unmistakable even through prison phones and distance. Or should I say Sarah Mitchell? Her blood froze. How did you? I'm in prison, not dead. I still have resources. People who owe me favors. His voice was calm, almost friendly. Relax. I'm not calling for revenge. I'm calling to say well done. Well done. You played the game better than anyone I've known. Better than my wife, better than my enemies, certainly better than me. Giancarlo laughed, bitter and impressed. You used everyone, me, Paolo, the FBI, your own survival instinct, and walked away clean. That takes skill. That takes the kind of ruthlessness I spent decades cultivating. Is there a point to this call? Sophia's hands were shaking. The point is this, you're free now, but freedom has weight. You'll carry what you did for the rest of your life. Every manipulation, every betrayal, every choice that prioritized your survival over morality. His voice softened. I just wanted you to know, that weight is worth it. Better to be free and guilty than innocent and owned. The line went dead. Sophia stood in her apartment, rain streaming down the windows, Giancarlo's words echoing in her mind. He was right. She did carry weight. She had manipulated, betrayed, calculated her way to freedom using other people as stepping stones. She wasn't innocent, but she was free. And maybe that was enough. Maybe survival wasn't about maintaining purity, it was about making impossible choices and living with the consequences. About breaking patterns even when breaking them required becoming something you'd once despised. Sophia looked at her reflection in the rain-dark window. Sarah Mitchell looked back, a woman who'd survived her family's betrayal, a mafia boss's obsession, and a federal investigation through strategy and will. A woman who'd chosen her own freedom over everyone else's expectations. She could live with that. The next morning, Sophia opened her cafe at 5 a.m., made coffee, served customers, built her life one espresso at a time. And when people asked about her past, she smiled and said, I used to run a cafe in Boston. Had to start over. Fresh beginning. They never asked why. People in witness protection never did. And Sophia never volunteered the truth, that fresh beginnings cost more than most people imagined. That freedom required sacrifices that stained your soul. That survival sometimes meant becoming the thing you'd fought against. But here's what Sophia had learned through all of it, what her family and Giancarlo and even the FBI had taught her. The world divided into two kinds of people. those who let life happen to them, and those who happened to life, those who surrendered, and those who survived. Sophia had spent 28 years being the first kind. She'd spend the rest of her life being the second. And if that made her ruthless, calculating, morally compromised, well, at least she was free. At least she was hers. What's more important, staying morally pure or surviving at any cost? Drop your honest answer in the comments. And if Sophia's story moved you, inspired you, or made you think differently about survival and freedom, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. We're building a family of people who aren't afraid to face hard truths and harder questions. Share your own survival story below. You never know who needs to hear that they're not alone in making impossible choices. Like this video if you want more stories that challenge you to think deeper. And remember, freedom isn't free, but sometimes it's worth every compromise, every sacrifice, every impossible choice. Thanks for watching, family. Until next time, stay strong, stay smart, and never let anyone own your story.